One of these shoes represents the best of a brand's past, and the other provides a glimpse into a brand's future. This is the Nike Vomero 16 and the ASICS Nimbus 24, and it's time to put these two shoes head to head. .70 miles total run commuting today in the Vomero 16, going for nice and easy running. And the day before, taking out the ASICS Nimbus 24 for an easy run of a little bit over 10 miles for an easy run / recovery run. A perfect way to compare these two shoes head to head. Now, before I give you my thoughts on these two shoes and which one I think is the better shoe, I want to go over some disclosures. The Vomero 16 is a pair of shoes that I purchased myself, and the Nimbus 24 was sent to me by ASICS for the purpose of review. However, regardless of how a shoe gets to me, no one's paying me to make this video or to use the shoe, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with those disclosures out of the way, let's talk about the Vomero 16 versus the Nimbus 24. First, let's talk about what makes this a good battle. Why am I putting these two shoes head to head? And it's because they have so much in common. They have similar use cases. They're both heavily cushioned daily trainers. They can be considered max cushion shoes as well. They have similar heel drops. They have similar weights. They have similar approaches to comfort, and they have similar prices as well. They even have a similar peculiarity where I think that in each of these shoes, I feel like the heel and the forefoot kind of have a little bit of a mismatch in terms of cushion. In both of these shoes, I feel like there's a lot of comfort and cushion built in to the heel, and then it just feels like kind of like a normal daily trainer up in front. So you've kind of got max cushion in the back, daily trainer in the forefoot, and that happens in both of these shoes. Because these shoes would be used so similarly, and because I think anyone considering one of these shoes should definitely be considering the other, that's why I think this makes for a great head-to-head battle. Now let's talk about what sets these two shoes apart. And I think that the main thing for me from like an overall theme of this video is that the Vomero 16 is more of the nostalgia play, and the Nimbus 24 is more of the look into ASICS future. Now, a lot of Nike shoes have been transitioning to newer foams and newer technologies like React foam and ZoomX foam and upgraded Zoom Air pockets, and to an extent, the Vomero 16 has that. It's got a Zoom Air core in the heel, and it's got that newer Zoom Air pocket in the forefoot. But at the same time, it has SRO2 as the carrier foam, or as the main foam that's in the midsole, which I don't know if it's exactly the same as Cushlon, which used to be in the Pegasus, but it feels and behaves a lot like Cushlon in my mind. And while a lot of the Nike shoes have been going in a new direction, namely the Pegasus moving to an all-React midsole, not everyone has been loving the changes with the Pegasus, myself included. And so for me, the Vomero 16 represents a little bit of the future, some of the newer technology, namely that ZoomX core, but also a lot of the same familiarity of the old, namely a Cushlon-like carrier with the Zoom Air pocket in the forefoot. Definitely reminds me of a lot of the older Pegasus models that I initially fell in love with in terms of Nike running shoes. Now, when we're looking at the Nimbus 24, we still have a lot of the same legacy things that we've seen in this shoe over the past 2 decades. And namely, they've got a lot of gel in the heel, and there's a little ring of gel in the forefoot. You can't see it, but it's kind of right here underneath the pad of the foot towards the big toe. And there is a truss stick system, which this year you actually can see. And what that is, it's a plastic plate that's placed inside the midsole, kind of sandwiched in between this white layer of foam and this blue layer of foam. And what it does, it's supposed to help with keeping the shoe stay rigid and prevent it from twisting too much as your foot hits the ground. But the main story with the 24 is that it's got a brand new foam, FF Blast Plus, which is one of the lighter, one of the springier, one of the bouncier foams that ASICS has. And it's a brand new foam that we saw previewed a little bit late last year in the Kinsei Blast, and now it's getting center stage in this Nimbus 24. So while it still has those vestiges of that storied past, it's bringing in some of the future, and I think it's the beginning of a new direction for a lot of the core of the ASICS lineup. Now, when it comes to what the running experience is like in both of these shoes, while I do think that they are in a lot of ways the same in terms of they feel like daily trainers that have a little bit of extra comfort, a little bit of extra cushion to them, I do think that a major way that sets these two shoes apart is the overall stack height and the way that the foams are behaving. So the Nimbus 24 is a much taller stack height shoe with 36 millimeters of stack height in the heel, whereas the Vomero 16 has 29.5 millimeters of stack height in the heel. They both have the same amount of heel drop, which means that in the Nimbus 24, because it starts out higher, it's going to end up higher in that forefoot as well, giving us 26 millimeters of that FF Blast Plus midsole foam, whereas the Vomero 16 comes in at a mild, for a max cushion shoe, amount of cushion in the forefoot, 19.5 millimeters of stack height. And that's a difference that I can definitely feel as I'm running in these shoes just from the heights alone. But combining that with the different way that the materials in the forefoot of this shoe also contributes to a different running experience in each of these shoes. Because of the fact that they're using Cushlon and that Zoom Air pocket, it's a very familiar feel to me in the Vomero 16, definitely very Pegasus-like in all the right ways, but it also feels like it's kind of like a regular daily trainer and conventional daily trainer levels of comfort. Not to say that it's a bad thing, but it's not something that I would consider consistent with something that's in the cushion daily trainer, and especially not in the max cushion category. Now, with the 26 millimeters of stack height of FF Blast Plus in the midsole of the Nimbus 24, I definitely feel like there's more midsole here and there's more comfort when my foot hits the ground in the Nimbus 24. But there is that gel that's in the forefoot. And in my earlier videos about the Nimbus 24, one of the things that I mentioned is that I feel that gel in the forefoot in the Nimbus 24, and I don't love it. I feel like there is maybe too much of a difference in the relative densities of the FF Blast Plus that's around the gel and then the gel itself. And so I feel like it's kind of poking me in the foot. And what that means is towards the later portions of a longer run can start to get to be a little bit bothersome. And so for me, anytime I take this shoe a little bit more than 10 miles, which is kind of like that medium long range for me, that's where I start to really find a little bit of discomfort from that gel, which is disappointing and unfortunate because otherwise I feel like the FF Blast Plus feels really nice in the forefoot. Now, the other ways that I think these two shoes are set apart are a little bit less substantial and kind of play into my overall decision a little bit differently. And they're both kind of visual. Now, one of the things that I definitely notice when I look at these two shoes is that they have very different approaches to comfort in the tongue. Now with the Vomero 16, you have more of like a traditional max cushion type approach to comfort, and you've got this giant pillow of padding that's on the tongue. It's extremely puffy. It's like folded over, a sweat sponge, but when it's drier out and it's not hot like it is in the winter, it's definitely very comfortable. And they've coupled that with a lacing structure that's more horizontal, which you can certainly lace your shoes in alternate ways, but the way that the Vomero 16 came was with this like horizontal lacing system, which isn't just for looks. I think that it's also intended to alleviate pressure that might come on the top of the foot. So people that have sensitive bones in the top of their feet are going to be liking this very traditional approach to comfort in the Vomero 16. Now, the way that the Nimbus 24 approaches comfort in the midfoot and on the top of the foot especially is kind of the exact opposite way. Instead of a big puffy memory foam type of pad, they've gone with no padding and they just have a knit tongue, one that I find to be incredibly comfortable and moves really well as you're going through that foot strike. Now, the other and last difference between these two shoes is I think that there is a very different aesthetic. I feel like in terms of the design, I much prefer the overall design of the Vomero 16 than I do to the Nimbus 24. Now, I do think that this is one of the better looking Nimbus shoes that ASICS has made in a very long time, but I still think overall that the Vomero 16 is a shoe that I just think looks better to the extent that that matters, whether you're running or wearing the shoe around casually. It's just something that I prefer to reach for, at least from an aesthetic perspective. So those are the main ways that I think that these two shoes are both similar and different. So now it's time to choose a champion. Now this one is a tough one because these shoes I do think are very similar. And the sentimental part of me is really reaching for the Vomero 16. There's so much familiarity with this shoe. I feel like it's a shoe that I've run in already in the past in a really good way, and I'm being reunited with an old friend. But I think in terms of the overall performance on what the shoes are trying to accomplish and how they're going about accomplishing it, I think that I just like this FF Blast Plus midsole foam a lot more than I like the SRO2 and the Zoom Air combo, at least in a cushioned daily trainer or the max cushion package for those tired days, for those recovery runs, for those easy runs. The Nimbus 24 in that situation is the better option for me. So let me know if you agree, and I especially want to know if you disagree and why. Tell me about it in the comments, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I do it over on my Kofuzi Run Club channel. That's where all the live streams are hosted. I'll post a link to the description down below, and hopefully I'll see you there in the chat. Before I go, I do want to talk about the charity runner for this week. We have a new charity runner, and that's Matthew Busser. He's going to be running the New York City Marathon and raising money for Team for Kids. This is his 4th time raising money for that charity, which is the New York Roadrunners charity that provides free running and other sports programming for 125,000 New York City kids and 250,000 kids nationwide. I was happy to donate $100 of my own money to Matthew's fundraising efforts, and I hope you'll consider donating even just the minimum amount to support a fellow runner. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?